All right, I want to welcome everybody who's here in person today and everybody who's going to watch this later on YouTube. We're quite privileged to have all this technology to help us with our communications. Today you're going to get an opportunity for visual communications as well as verbal, because formerly we were doing mostly ZoomMuse with poets and writers. Before I talk in more detail about my book, I want to give a little bit of a preamble. And first of all, at the beginning of my book, I give some acknowledgements, and I also would like to do that today and acknowledge both the designer who put my book together. His name is Brad Grignon, and he lives near me outside of Chemainus. And the woman who was my editor. I learned that editing is a challenging process, and she was very helpful to me. She lives in San Miguel and is a writer, and she was able to check all my stories for accuracy and check my Spanish in the few places where I use it. And she was very encouraging. Both she and Brad encouraged me a lot in the process, because this is the first book that I've ever put together. And I didn't quite decide to do a coloring book, but a lot of my friends suggested that I do one. They would look at the drawings in my sketchbooks, and because coloring books have been popular lately, and I do a lot of line drawing, people would say, those would make an interesting coloring book. And I'd say, well, I don't know if I'm very interested in putting together a coloring book, but the idea grew on me, and finally I took it on as a pandemic project. The other thing I want to talk about a bit is my artist background. When reflecting on it, I was remembering back how the man that started Subud, that we call bapak, which is a term of respect, like calling somebody in English sir or mister. Once he told me that when he was talking about me, he said I was a person who liked to look for things. And then I realized, and thinking back, yes, I like to not only look for things, but look at things. And art seems to be a very important way of doing that. And ministry for me was also a good way of looking at things in a different way, mostly looking about ideas and beliefs and studying world religions, reflecting on different spiritual practices, all part of looking for things. So in the photos that you're going to see now of this book, you'll see how I have enjoyed traveling and looking at things while I'm traveling. And I appreciate places that feel timeless. Going into an old colonial town, that's why Mexico has been very important to me. When I was an international helper, I was very attracted to many of the villages I was able to visit while I was in South America, and members would take me out to archaeological sites and little villages in Mexico and different places. And I kind of like places that remind me of what life for us human beings used to be like at earlier times. I love color, life, and movement, and I really appreciate plein air drawing and painting, where I can be out of doors drawing and painting from looking at things. Many artists today work mostly from imagination and expressing maybe unconscious ideas through color, texture, line, shape, form, etc. But I'm still part of the many artists who still like to paint and draw things that they find interesting that they're looking at. So maybe we could go ahead and look at the title page, or at the next slide, the cover page of the book. I chose this little painting. This was a little 10 by 10 painting. I was doing a series of them for an art exhibition here in Chemainus, and I had it sitting on my couch. I was looking at it while I was watching TV, and suddenly I realized the type for my book would fit quite neatly into the onto that fountain. So I sent the image to my designer, and he agreed. He said that would work really well for the cover of your book. So we went ahead with that. And also it was, I think it was appropriate because it's fairly simple, bright colors, um, a family scene, and a little touristy, inspired by travel, local people sitting on a fountain. So let's go to the next one that also shows the back page. So this slide shows both the cover page and the back page that has a biography of me with a color photo, and Brad, the designer, included 5 or 6 of my original paintings there. And these same paintings are half page size towards the end of the book because we only had so many colored pages. The majority of the pages are black and white drawings. And those paintings were chosen because they're a mix of images from Canada and from Mexico. The book continues with this drawing is on the title page, and I colored it in with colored pencils and felt tip pens just to show an example of what one of the drawings could look like when it's been colored. And this begins the series of black and white drawings that take up most of the pages of the book. As you see, each drawing has a story, and the story has been thought out and researched. I put in a little bit of information about it. For example, this drawing of the jaguar was from one of my favorite museums in Mexico. And you can read that information and get a sense of what I try to share in the stories to make the drawings more meaningful for people. And I hope that people will be inspired to add some color to them. Few people have surprised me. My brother gave it a try, got a hold of his wife's colored felt pens, and started filling in the colors and surprised me. And while I remember the people that are buying my book, I'm reminding them that if they're going to press really hard on those felt pens, to put a sheet between the pages so the color doesn't go through. Colored pencils are no problem at all. They don't go through to the other side. The book has extra heavy paper, so it does prevent a certain amount of colors going through, but it can happen. So let's go on to the next one. I think it was Cynthia, my editors, that suggested to me, she said, especially some of us Americans, we don't always know where everything is. Canada's a country to the north of us. Don't mean to offend anybody, I'm just joking, but I did a hand-drawn map and kept it fairly simple and put little dots of all the places on Vancouver Island in Mexico where the drawings and the paintings were done, just to help to orient people. So let's look at the next one. Oh, this was the preface where I tried to describe my intentions for the book and the process that I went through in putting the book together. The book continues with more black and white drawings. This one is in the center of the book, and it's able to take two complete pages, and it's taken exactly from my sketchbook. I sat at the bottom on one of those ledges, and the staircase up there, I had gone up there the night before with a friend, and it's a pretty formidable staircase, like many of the streets in the town of San Cristobal in the state of Chiapas near the Guatemalan border. I spent a month there exploring, and I just loved going out every day with my sketchbook and finding a place, usually in the shade, where I could just sit and draw. I'd love to be able to do more of that. Maybe when the pandemic's over, I'll have a chance to do some of it again. And connected to Guatemala, this is a drawing I did of a little girl sitting on a rainbow blanket. Little girl from Guatemala, from one of my many trips to Guatemala. I've been fascinated by that country for many years. Even before I retired from ministry, I used to go there on my holidays, and I was helped out by my friend Sheila, who lives in Victoria right now. And she first got me interested when I lived on Salt Spring in going down to Guatemala, because she was part of a Mayan NGO helping students with the cost of their education and women's programs, weavers. It was all very, very meaningful and very interesting to me. And this one is a colored version I did with colored pencils and felt pens, again, just as an example of what can be done with some color with these drawings. This isn't in color in the book. This is one that I did for my exhibition and had it sitting out just to show people that one of the drawings had been colored by hand. In the following page, there's another one in color. This is a painting I did of houseboats in Cowichan Bay, near where I live in Chemainus on Vancouver Island, an acrylic painting. And the drawing is a detail of that. And there's a little story about both the painting and the drawing in the bottom half of this page. And the next page is a simpler line drawing of the same subject, the boathouses with the canoe and the reflections in the water. My thought was that this had bigger shapes and not as much detail and would be more appropriate for coloring. Sedana, by the way, means a window to a higher reality. This is one of my paintings that's in the book, and it was inspired by a trip I took to Tofino with some friends. And during a walk early one morning, I saw these men standing on the dock holding the sheets of plywood, and it was a very interesting composition with the shadows on the pier and the shapes of the mountain and the water and the interesting little water taxi. And took some photographs, and later I did a painting of it, and I entered it into a Vancouver Island juried show put on by the Ladysmith Arts Council this winter, and it was accepted, and I was very surprised that they gave it the first prize in the two-dimensional category. I also was not only surprised but very pleased because there was a cash award with it, and I haven't had that happen before. So I was pretty pleased about that. Now I think we're going to look at some of the colored paintings. I put this one in the book because I think this is quite typical of what many Canadians expect when they think of going to Mexico in the winter. It's a beach scene from a little town called Las Ayala, north of Puerto Vallarta. Friends of mine from Gabriola had built a little house in that Mexican town. It's a very Mexican beach, and I quite liked it. It wasn't, the only tourists there besides us were mostly Mexican tourists. So it had some Mexican personality for sure. So the next one is from my sketchbook, a colored drawing no, it's a little painting from the drawing that was in my sketchbook. This is a little 10 by 10 acrylic painting of the urban sketchers sitting in a patio in San Miguel de Allende. I used to join them once a week. We would go to a different location every week. And this is a group of artists who meet up all over the world. And when any city I go to, if I Googled urban sketchers with the name of the town, I'd probably find a group and find out where they're meeting that week. So I have joined a few other groups of urban sketchers. In this drawing, in the background, those little blue squares are wash tubs. And this particular location has an interesting history in San Miguel because the water came from a spring above the little town in the early years, and the people used to do their laundry there. Now mostly people sit and relax and or read. Only the occasional person still comes and does their laundry there. And that's the small acrylic painting that ended up on the cover. And the next one is from my website. If this was done from a watercolor sketch I did in the vineyard at the top of the hill looking down. This is Averill Creek Vineyard near Duncan, and one of the more beautiful locations I've painted on Vancouver Island. So if you want to see more of my art, you're welcome to go to my website. I don't update it as regularly as I could, but it does have quite a few images of my artwork, including some of the batiks I did many years ago that were influenced by the Indonesian batiks that I saw when Subud members brought them back from Indonesia. And when I saw them, I'd been trained in printmaking, and I said, I think I could do batik. So I figured out my own way of doing it. And later I was fortunate to be able to set up a study experience in Yogyakarta. I went to Indonesia and studied batik for a while. So I think that brings us to the end of the book.
That was a wonderful presentation. Mm-hmm. Thanks very much, Rohana.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody want to ask Rohana a question or make a comment about what they've seen? Leanna, go ahead.
I'm just really pleased to get to have an inside view of your work. I followed you for quite a while. I would be interested where the book is available, the coloring book.
So far, I've been fairly quiet about it because I haven't been sure about how I would distribute it in a pandemic. But what I've been doing is sending it out to friends, and instead of one at a time, many of my friends have ordered 5 or 6 of them for people who live in the same town, and then they've split up the cost of mailing. I self-published the book, and I had it printed here in Victoria near me because I wanted it on a heavier paper. And I'm considering possibly I could put it on Amazon, but it would not be on a heavy enough paper that people wouldn't easily use felt pens with with the thinner paper. And I've had some reservations about Amazon, but I'm just sitting with that right now. And it was a pandemic project, and I'm retired, and I'm pretty careful about how far I extend myself and my energies at this stage in life. So ordering from me via mail is probably the best way. I did FedEx is even more expensive than Canada Post. I've been selling them for $25 Canadian. So
Okay, it's lovely. I'm so happy
okay.
to be here.
That's
Thanks.
about $20 in real money. Anyway, Lydia, do you want to say something? Go ahead.
Yes, first of all, it's always a delight to see your artwork. Or I don't even know how many years I've been enjoying it. It's been a part of my life since the early 70s. And everywhere I've gone around the world, I've seen your wonderful batiks hanging in people's homes. And I've always felt right at home as soon as I saw that. Then I knew those people were good people, because if they had Rohana's artwork, they had to be really nice people. So I'm thrilled to get a hold of this coloring book, and I'm hoping it's going to help me with pandemic depression. Your message with my email.
My email, it's very simple, rohana@shaw.ca.
Rohana@shaw.ca. Okay.
Hi.
Anybody else?
Didn't get a chance to say hello to you at the beginning. Great to see you again.
Oh, I love this. I love this format that you've developed. It's really great. I think it'll make a wonderful gift for my niece, who's a budding artist, and I think she would love it.
Yeah.
And I too have your work in my house.
Oh, great. It's good to know that it's out there and people are enjoying it.
Right. And when do you think you'll go back to Mexico?
I would like to go back next winter. I found the winter here very long and dark and wet and cold. But I managed to distract myself, and I also wanted to stay safe. So I was actually quite fortunate to be where I am during a pandemic. I think many of us feel that way, very grateful for our homes and our activities that give our lives some meaning.
Right.
And Zoom. I spend a lot of time on Zoom calls.
Latifa, did you want to say something? Unmute yourself, please.
Hi to everybody, and hi, Rohana. I'd like to order some more coloring books, so I'll be in touch with you if I know the amount. It's always changing.
Athena, unmute yourself. Or you are? Yeah, go ahead.
I think I'm unmuted, but I also have Rohana's work. I mean, it's not in my house right now, it's in storage, but I know it's there. And I just wanted to say that I really liked the presentation, and the slideshow went very well. And I love the stories. I've seen a lot of your artwork and lived around it down in Mexico. But I really love the addition of the stories.
Yeah.
So I think that makes it a little bit different as a coloring book, as an adult coloring book.
Yeah.
And I never think of you as a writer, Rohana, but it might be nice to write down some more of those stories. That's what I was thinking when I was listening and reading some of the stories. I just want to make that point, and I really enjoyed the presentation and hope there are more of them.
Lydia, what did you want to say?
Am I okay now?
Yeah, you're okay.
I'm sorry, even the simplest things, mute, unmute. I can't get it. So anyway, Rohana, I wanted just to speak about how much. I love that batik work you did. And I know you're long past that stuff now, but I kind of miss it. And I don't know if there's any way you could give us any more of that stuff at some point, or perhaps you could share with us where you're planning to go from here. I know this coloring book is kind of it's a very nice way of connecting to people all over the place and giving them a little taste of what you do. But as an artist, I'm wondering where your drive is taking you now. What would be the next thing you'd like to explore?
In my process of painting, I find usually the painting tells me where I want to go next. And I've been, certainly my use of colors has changed, and I've simplified and I've abstracted more, although I still love complexity because I really enjoy pattern and texture and color from my textile background. And I don't want to work completely abstractly though, because I appreciate the emotional content of having a subject. So as much as I appreciate other forms of art, including abstract art, I prefer this stylizing objects and people that I look at, and of course making changes to make an arrangement that I appreciate. And my recent painting is behind me on the wall. I don't know if you can see it. And are you able to see that?
Yes. Yeah.
This town of Granada from above, an aerial view, and in the clouds, there's the shape of an angel. Are you able to make that out?
Yes.
And that's one direction I'm going in next. And the painting, it just presented itself while I was painting it. When I started painting the sky, I wanted some clouds. And as I added the clouds, I saw the angel, and I added a few houses and took a few out and just let my imagination go with it. And I almost felt like I was there in that village walking along the street, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So that's part of my process.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question. It's an interesting question for me to respond to. But I don't actually have a mental or intellectual idea of where I'm going next. I just let it happen. And thanks for the invitation to do more batiks, but technologically I'm 79 this year, and working with vats of dye and big pots of boiling water and so forth, it's not a very good idea. So I think painting is physically a medium that's more accessible for me at this stage of my life, as much as I love batik.
I have a question. I'm a writer, and maybe it's become too easy, but I'm used to cutting and pasting and constantly revising my writing. You go in and you tweak stuff, and or you can sort of, so changing constantly. And it strikes me that with painting, you are less like, I don't know, do you do that a lot? Do you paint over stuff? Or like once you've, like in that beautiful painting of carrying the plywood down to the dock at Tofino, when I saw the huge sweep and the colors on the water, like, did you sort of just put those lines in and then the color and that was it? Or did you revise that sort of thing? How did that work?
I did some sketches beforehand and came up with the design. And while I was painting it, I added the colors. But once I finished it, when I finished what I had to say, I usually sit with it for a few days and then I varnish it. And once I varnish it, I try not to go back to it. But that's my process. I say, I've said what I have to say. That's it. I'm moving on to the next one. But I know a lot of very competent artists who don't work that way at all. One whose work I quite like in Mexico for example, she's an American painter who's been living down there for a long time. She's always painting and repainting and moving things around and changing them. That's her style, part of her process. And I don't like to work that way.
Well, thank you. Does anybody else want to say anything or ask a question of Rohana? No? Going once?
Oh, no, there's a question.
Hi, Athena. You have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay. Just a comment. I know Rohana had put together a very successful workshop where she had people going out into the streets and sketching and then painting. And I am a completely non-artist. I've participated in some of her drawing classes, which I found wonderful in San Miguel. So I was just thinking, Rohana, if you ever are open to doing a second workshop post-pandemic, this might be a good venue to talk a little bit about the first workshop.
Good idea.
Well, I could respond if there's enough time to say a bit about the workshop. But
you've got all the time in the world. Go right ahead.
At first, when I was asked to do the workshop, I was asked by an owner of B&B in a gallery in San Miguel, and she has exhibited my paintings there on 2 or 3 occasions. And she was developing her business where she has an art studio in the B&B, as well as a little restaurant area and the gallery space. And she was inviting artists to do workshops in her space. Of course, the people who attended were to stay at the B&B, and it was all quite expensive. At first, I thought, well, it's really too high end for a lot of my friends. It's not the usual way that I would do things. I'd find a place that's a little more affordable. But I thought, well, it could be an interesting experience. And when I did the math, it looked like I could also earn enough money that it could perhaps pay for my next visit. It actually gave me enough money to pay for the expenses in producing the coloring book. And I did find enough people to attend the workshop. There were 3 Canadians and an American. It was a small group. I ended up with only about 6 people, but it was a nice group for the first time to be taking a group around town drawing. I had to set it up where I chose the locations where they could draw. In the mornings, we had studio time where I would introduce a subject, do a bit of teaching, and then we would have coffee, and then we went off somewhere and painted for the afternoon. And I had to have restaurants chosen for lunch and dinner, and everybody had a marvelous time. I was exhausted. I had to be at the B&B, meet up with them after breakfast and stay with them until after dinner. And often I got home fairly late, had to get up the next morning, did a lot of walking up and down hills in San Miguel. But once I got into it, I really had a good time. And the people who came had a great time. So it would be worth doing again. It's just to find people that are willing to go there. Most of my personal friends were terrified at the idea of going to Mexico. They have visions of violence and yeah, they just had a lot of reasons why they wouldn't want to go to do an art workshop in Mexico. But the people who came had a wonderful time. The B&B looked after them well. They came away with some great drawings and paintings, and they learned a lot about Mexico. So it ended up being quite successful. Thanks, Athena, for giving me the opportunity to talk about it.
That's a great summary resume of what the workshop is like, and I'm sure we'll be interested if you offer it again, Rohana.
Yeah.
Good to see everybody.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Yes,
Okay.
Latifa.
Bye.
Bye, Latifa.